Ebenezer Scrooge had always believed that the dead stayed dead. It was one of the few comforts he allowed himself. Christmas Eve pressed against London like a damp shroud. Fog crept low through the streets, swallowing lamplight and sound alike, until the city felt buried beneath its own breath. The bells rang anyway, slow, uneven chimes that arrived late and overlapped one another, as though the towers themselves were confused about the hour. Scrooge flinched at each toll, irritation souring in his chest. He worked by candlelight in his counting house, long after the clerks had fled into warmth and company. The ledgers lay open before him, their pages worn thin from decades of use. Names marched down the columns in rigid lines, followed by figures that represented ownership, obligation, and failure. He knew most of the names by heart. He remembered their voices, their pleading. Some had cried, some had begged, some had simply gone quiet and never returned. Those names never left the books. The fire had nearly died. Scrooge noticed, but did nothing. The cold kept him alert. It bit into his fingers until they ached and stiffened, reminding him that flesh was a liability and comfort a distraction. Outside, laughter drifted through the fog, carolers no doubt. Their cheer grated against him like grit in a wound. He rose abruptly and slammed the window shut. The glass shuddered in its frame, and then disturbingly shuddered again a moment later, as if something had pressed against it from the outside after he had already turned away. Scrooge did not look back. When at last he gathered his coat and extinguished the candle, the darkness rushed in too quickly. The counting house felt wrong without light, its corners deeper, its ceiling higher than he remembered. His footsteps echoed strangely, delayed, as though the sound needed time to decide whether it belonged to him. At the door, key in hand, he hesitated. A sensation crawled up his spine, cold and intimate. The certainty that he was being observed settled over him with unbearable weight. Not watched from afar, but studied, measured. He turned slowly toward the door knocker. Jacob Marley stared back at him, not a likeness, not a trick of shadow. Marley's face was fused to the iron, his skin stretched thin and pale as boiled parchment. His eyes bulged horribly, blood vessels ruptured and floating in yellowed whites. His mouth hung open, teeth clenched so tightly they cracked, as if he had died screaming and never been allowed to stop. Frost clung to his face, blooming outward with each ragged, silent breath that misted from his lips. Scrooge staggered backward, his heel catching on the step. His heart pounded so violently he thought it might tear free of his chest. "You are not real," he whispered. Marley's eyes rolled in their sockets. Scrooge slammed his eyes shut, gasping. He counted. Numbers steadied him, numbers always obeyed. When he opened them again, the knocker was iron once more, cold, plain, mercifully lifeless. His laughter came sharp and brittle, a sound with no warmth in it. "Humbug," he said, because he needed the word to be true. Inside the house, the air was stale and unmoving, thick with dust and old regrets. Shadows pooled along the walls, stretching unnaturally toward him as he passed, clinging to his coat like grasping fingers. The staircase loomed ahead, each step groaning softly beneath its own age. The clock on the mantel ticked. Then it ticked again. Then it ticked backward. Scrooge froze. The second hand jerked, stuttering as though caught on something unseen. A faint, wet sound accompanied each movement, like skin peeling from damp stone. He backed away, pulse roaring in his ears. That was when he heard the chains. Metal dragged across the floor below, slow and deliberate. Not the frantic rattling of an animal, but the patient movement of something that knew it would be heard. Each scrape vibrated through the floorboards and up into his bones. Scrooge pressed his hand to his chest, struggling to breathe. "No," he said to the empty house. The sound grew closer, not louder, closer. The candles flared without warning, flames bending inward as if drawn towards something unseen. The temperature dropped sharply, breath fogging in the air. The walls groaned, beams twisting as though the house itself were recoiling. The clock stopped. The chains fell silent. For one terrible moment, Scrooge thought it was over. Then a voice whispered his name from directly behind him, soft, intimate, and full of suffering. "Ebenezer!" And the night finally began. Scrooge did not turn around. He stood rigid, fingers curled so tightly into his coat that the seams bit into his palms. The air behind him felt wrong, thick, pressurized, like the moment before drowning. The whisper of his name lingered, stretched thin, vibrating against the inside of his skull. "Ebenezer!" It was Marley's voice, not as he remembered it. It carried the weight of something forced to speak through pain, each syllable pulled free like a confession extracted under torture. The sound scraped against Scrooge's nerves, awakening memories he had sealed away with numbers and ink. "You're dead," Scrooge said hoarsely. "You died 7 years ago." A sound like wet laughter answered him. "I did," the voice agreed, "and I have never stopped." The temperature plunged. Frost bloomed across the walls in jagged veins, crawling outward from a single point in the center of the room. The shadows recoiled, stretching thin, then snapped back as something stepped forward into the light. Jacob Marley stood before him, or what remained of him. His body was translucent and distorted, as though viewed through warped glass. His flesh sagged unnaturally from his bones, pulled downward by invisible weight. Chains were wrapped around him, not draped, but embedded, biting into his body, sinking through skin and muscle as though they had grown there. Each link bore objects Scrooge recognized immediately: ledgers, locks, keys, coins fused together in clotted masses of metal. They moved, not swung, twitched, as if alive. Marley's eyes were the worst of it. They were hollowed, sunken so deeply they seemed to look inward rather than out. Inside them, Scrooge saw movement, flickers of memory, faces contorted in fear, mouths opening in silent screams. "I tried to warn you," Marley said. His jaw cracked as he spoke, bones shifting with audible strain. "But I was too late, and now I am everywhere." The room changed. The walls peeled away like rotting skin, revealing scenes layered beneath them. Scrooge saw streets he knew, men and women hunched in doorways, hands outstretched, eyes hollow. Their faces turned toward him in unison, mouths opening wide enough to split their cheeks. Chains burst from their throats. They wrapped around Scrooge's ankles, wrists, chest, not physically, but with a crushing certainty that left him gasping. He staggered backward, but the floor softened beneath his feet, sinking like flesh beneath a blade. "You felt powerful," Marley whispered, drifting closer. The air around him stank of cold iron and decay. Each refusal, each door you closed, each life you reduced to a column of figures. Marley reached out. His hand passed through Scrooge's chest. Scrooge screamed, not in pain, but in recognition. He felt them then, the weight of every life he had crushed beneath indifference, the cold nights, the sickness, the slow starvation disguised as moral lesson. They pressed into him all at once, a tidal wave of suffering that flooded his lungs and left him choking. "You taught yourself that cruelty was necessary," Marley said softly. "That suffering was deserved." Marley's face twisted, skin tearing as his mouth stretched into something far too wide. "So did I." The visions intensified. Scrooge saw Marley's eternity. Not fire or demons, but endless corridors lined with doors he was forced to open. Behind each waited someone he had failed, someone he had condemned. Each time he reached for forgiveness, the chains tightened, dragging him onward, never allowing rest. "I cannot escape it," Marley said, his voice breaking into 1,000 overlapping echoes. "But you still breathe." Marley leaned in close, his ruined face inches from Scrooge's own. "Which is why they are coming." The chains retracted suddenly, snapping back into Marley's body with sickening finality. The room slammed back into place, walls reforming, shadows snapping into their corners. Marley began to fade. "No!" Scrooge reached out instinctively, terror ripping through him. "What do you mean?" Marley's eyes burned into his. "They will tear you open," he whispered. "Not your body, your excuses, your memories, your lies." The last thing to vanish was his mouth, still moving, still screaming, even after no sound remained. The room fell silent. Scrooge collapsed to his knees, gasping, clutching at his chest as though he might still feel Marley's hand inside him. The clock began ticking again. 1, 2, 3. From somewhere beyond sight, a child began to cry, and Scrooge realized with growing horror that the night was far from finished. Scrooge did not hear the spirit arrive. There was no knock, no wind, no cold announcement. One moment he was alone on the floor of his sitting room, lungs burning, heart pounding against his ribs like it wanted out. And the next, the room remembered something it had forgotten. The walls began to bleed light, not warmth, not illumination. A thin, jaundiced glow seeped from the cracks between the boards, pulsing softly, like something breathing just beneath the surface. The shadows recoiled, peeling away from corners and pooling beneath the furniture as if afraid. Scrooge struggled to his feet. "No more," he rasped to the empty air. "I've seen enough." A child laughed. The sound came from everywhere at once, high, brittle, distorted. It echoed with a strange delay, overlapping itself, as though the laughter were being replayed badly by the house. "You've seen nothing," a voice said gently. The ghost of Christmas. Past stood before him. It wore the shape of a child, small and thin, its limbs slightly too long, joints bending at unsettling angles. Its face flickered constantly, features slipping and reforming like wax held too close to flame. At times it was a boy Scrooge recognized, at others a hollow-eyed thing with no mouth at all. Its eyes never changed. They were bright, wet, expectant. Before Scrooge could speak, the floor vanished. He fell, not downward but backward, his body pulled through memory like meat through a grinder. The house dissolved, replaced by the sharp sting of cold air and the smell of old stone. A schoolroom. His schoolroom. Scrooge stood as a child again, small hands clenched, breath fogging in the unheated room. Desks sat empty around him, abandoned for the holidays. The door was locked from the outside. "I remember this," Scrooge whispered. "I was alone." "No," the spirit said softly, appearing beside him. "You were learning." The walls shifted. The shadows stretched into shapes. Thin, human outlines pressed flat against the stone, mouths opening silently. Their hands reached toward young Scrooge, fingers scraping along the walls, leaving pale marks like frostbite. Scrooge backed away. "They didn't visit you," the spirit continued. "They didn't save you. They didn't love you." The child Scrooge began to cry. The sound split something open inside him. "Stop," Scrooge begged. "Please." The scene shattered. Now he stood in the workshop where he'd apprenticed, older, bitter, watching himself work. The faces around him were wrong, too still, their smiles held too long, stretching wider and wider until their cheeks tore. "You learned efficiency here," the spirit said. "How to measure worth." The apprentices turned toward him in unison. Their eyes were gone. Black pits yawned where they should have been, and from each poured a slow trickle of coins that clattered wetly onto the floor. Scrooge screamed. The spirit touched his forehead. The world collapsed inward. He saw every refusal he had ever made, but not as memory, as consequence. A woman coughing blood into a frozen handkerchief. A man collapsing in an alley, breath rattling as frost sealed his lungs. A child staring at an empty table, eyes dull with hunger, whispering Scrooge's name like a curse taught too early. "You called it discipline," the spirit said, its voice now layered, adult and child, male and female, all speaking together. Responsibility, order. The visions pressed closer, crowding him, hands reaching, nails digging into his skin. "You called it necessary." Scrooge felt his body begin to split, not physically, but emotionally, like something being peeled apart layer by layer. Each justification tore loose, exposing something raw and screaming beneath. He fell to his knees. "I didn't know," he sobbed. "I didn't know." The spirit's face stopped flickering. For the first time, it became still. "You did," it said. Its eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of something like joy. The room went dark. Scrooge was left alone, kneeling in the silence, gasping for breath that tasted like ash and old regret. Somewhere nearby, another clock began to tick, slower, heavier. And as the shadows began to rise again, Scrooge understood the truth at last. The past had not come to teach him. It had come to finish breaking him. Scrooge awoke, choking. His mouth was stuffed with something warm and wet. He gagged, clawing it free, and screamed when he realized it was food. Half-chewed meat, still steaming, streaked with blood that was not his own. He fell forward onto a banquet table. It stretched farther than his eyes could follow, vanishing into darkness at both ends. The table sagged under the weight of excess. Roasted birds split open and crawling with maggots. Loaves of bread that pulsed as though breathing. Bowls of fruit collapsed into rot, leaking sweet-smelling decay that made his stomach churn. Candles burned along its length, but the flames were sickly green, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. At the head of the table sat the ghost of Christmas present. It was vast. Its body overflowed the chair, flesh swelling and sloughing like overheated wax. Rolls of skin, folded over chains of gold and silver, sunk deep into its body, half dissolved by rot. Its face was bloated beyond humanity, eyes sunk into pits of fat, mouth stretched into a permanent grin that revealed too many teeth. Each breath it took sounded wet. Each breath it exhaled smelled like sickness. "Eat," it said. Scrooge staggered back, slipping on grease and blood. "What is this place?" The spirit laughed. The sound was deafening. A chorus of laughter layered atop screaming. The table began to shake, plates rattling violently as the darkness beyond the candles stirred. "This," the spirit said, spreading its massive arms, is now. The darkness surged forward. Scenes burst open along the table like wounds. Scrooge saw families huddled in unheated rooms, breath fogging the air as children whimpered from hunger. He saw men working themselves raw, fingers splitting and bleeding for wages that barely kept them alive. He saw women kneeling beside dying loved ones, prayers unanswered, eyes hollow with exhaustion. And through it all, through every scene, Scrooge saw himself, not watching, judging. Ledger lines burned themselves across the visions, numbers branded foreheads, names were crossed out in red as lives flickered and went dark. You see them every day, the spirit said, shoveling handfuls of rotting food into its mouth. It chewed loudly, chunks falling from its lips back onto the table. You smell them in the streets, you hear them begging. The spirit leaned forward. You choose not to see. The table lurched violently. Scrooge was dragged forward by unseen hands, forced to his knees. The food piled higher around him, burying his legs, pressing into his chest. The smell became unbearable. Sweet rot, bile, feces, blood. From beneath the table, children crawled out. They were impossibly thin, skin stretched tight over sharp bones. Their eyes were too large, shining with hunger so intense it bordered on madness. Their mouths opened and closed soundlessly as they reached for the scraps that fell from the spirit's feast. "Want," the spirit said, pointing to one. A girl clutched Scrooge's coat, fingers numb with cold. Her grip was weak, desperate. "I'm hungry," she whispered. "Where are your parents?" Scrooge asked, voice shaking. The spirit answered for her. "Dead," it said cheerfully. "Worked too long, ate too little." The girl's mouth stretched wider than it should have. Her jaw cracked as it opened, splitting her face down the middle. Inside was not a tongue, but a mass of writhing numbers crawling over one another, whispering debts Scrooge had written himself. Scrooge screamed. The spirit rose to its full height. Its body tore and reformed, flesh dripping onto the table like melting fat. From beneath its robes, two figures emerged. They were children, or what remained of them. Their bodies were twisted, malformed, bones protruding at wrong angles, eyes clouded and unfocused. One clutched its stomach, which was hollowed inward as though something had been carved out. The other's mouth was sewn shut with black thread. "Do you know them?" the spirit asked softly. Scrooge shook his head, sobbing. "They live with mankind," the spirit continued, "and they cling to me. Above all, beware them." The children turned towards Scrooge. The sewn mouth split open. Inside was not flesh, but darkness. And from that darkness came voices. Every excuse Scrooge had ever made, every justification, every cold, careful reason for cruelty. They poured into him, filling his ears, his throat, his lungs. The feast collapsed. The table folded inward, snapping like bone. The spirit loomed over him, its grin stretching wider still. "This is your present," it whispered, "and it will not end when the night does." The candles went out. Scrooge was left screaming in the dark, buried beneath the weight of lives still suffering, right now, because of him. And somewhere far away, a bell began to toll again. Slower, heavier, final. There was no arrival, no door opening, no wind, no voice. The darkness simply noticed Scrooge. He lay on the floor, curled inward, lungs screaming, mind fractured by everything he had been forced to witness. The last bell's toll still vibrated through him, heavy enough to bruise the soul. The shadows began to move. They stretched upward, gathering themselves into a shape that refused definition. It was tall, too tall, its edges fraying and reforming constantly, as if reality itself struggled to decide what it was allowed to be. Where a face should have been, there was only depth. Endless, swallowing depth. The ghost of Christmas, yet to come, did not speak. It did not need to. It pointed. The world peeled open. Scrooge stood in the street outside his own counting house. Morning light struggled through smog and frost, thin and anemic. People passed without seeing him. Their bodies moved automatically, eyes deadened by routine and fatigue. A cart rolled past. Something lay beneath a sheet. Scrooge followed it. The sheet was pulled back in a narrow alley behind a workhouse. The body beneath was thin, shriveled, mouth frozen open in a silent plea. The face was grey, starved and unmistakable. His. "No," Scrooge whispered. "No, this isn't—" The ghost stepped closer. Scrooge saw more. Men rifling through his rooms, laughing as they stole what little warmth he had allowed himself. A woman tearing curtains into rags, a clerk tossing ledgers into a fire, watching names curl and blacken into nothing. No mourners, no prayers. No one spoke his name with anything resembling kindness. The scene shifted again. A graveyard. Snow fell thick and wet, muting sound, swallowing the world. The ghost led him to a stone shoved hastily into the ground, its inscription shallow and already eroding. Ebenezer Scrooge. Nothing further. Scrooge fell to his knees, sobbing. "I can change," he begged the empty air. "I see it now. I swear I see it. Just give me time, please." The ghost finally moved. It reached out. Its hand passed through Scrooge's chest just as Marley's had, but this time it did not withdraw. Scrooge felt himself being pulled apart. Not flesh, not bone. Time. He saw every Christmas yet to come, unchanged. Hunger repeating itself. Cold claiming bodies. Children growing into the same hollow-eyed adults. The cycle grinding forward endlessly, fueled by indifference, by systems built on suffering, built by men like him, built by him. "You don't need to change," a voice whispered, not from the ghost, but from within Scrooge himself. "You already did." The pressure intensified. Scrooge screamed as something tore free of him, something heavy, coiled, familiar. Chains. They burst from his body, wrapping around his limbs, his throat, his spine. Each link bore a face now, faces he recognized, mouths open in endless accusation. The ghost stepped back, and Scrooge understood. This was not a warning. This was a handoff. The darkness receded. The world snapped back into place. Scrooge awoke, standing upright, transparent, weightless. The room looked wrong, too solid, too distant. His hands passed through the furniture when he reached out. Panic rose, but no breath came with it. The door knocker rattled. Scrooge turned. In the polished iron, he saw a face staring back at him. His own, eyes sunken, mouth stretched in a scream that would never be heard. Frost creeping across his features as the metal grew cold around him. Footsteps approached from the street. A man's voice muttered irritably, "Humbug!" Scrooge tried to warn him, tried to scream, tried to beg. But all that came out was silence, and the slow, inevitable sound of chains beginning to drag across the floor. And somewhere, far away, the bells rang again. Christmas had not redeemed Ebenezer Scrooge. It had replaced him. And the night went on.